Shalom from Jerusalem. Again, to all our viewers, this is TV7, and we are on our monthly program, the Middle East Review. And with me, my good friend and colleague, Eran Lerman, Colonel Reserve in Intelligence, Professor, Doctor, and so many other titles that it will be too, the program itself will be
Father
too short.
and grandfather.
So again, here we are, as we have said, there's never a dull moment in our region in the Middle East. And I would say also what we see is that the pace of changes, of major changes and turns is even becoming faster, the pace itself. And I think for this show, I think the main subject, the topic would be, of course, Syria, the fall of the Assad regime and the implications to the region, and not just to the region, but globally. Of course, implications to Israel and all the other neighbors, starting with Turkey and, of course, Iran, Jordan, Egypt, of course.
Increasingly worried.
And if we enlarge the picture, Russia, the United States, and, of course, within Syria, far-reaching implications on the different segments of population, Kurds, Druze, of course the Alawites, which are now on the run in a way, Christians, and of course the Sunnis. And in that respect, Iran, why don't we start with maybe the big picture? Because there is a saying that, beware the devil you don't know, You prefer the devil you know. The devil we know, of course, is Iran. And without minimizing whatsoever the threat from Iran, which is the nuclear. But the situation, some say it's better because Iran is on the losing side. But on the other hand, who are we getting? So in that respect, are we getting back ISIS, Al-Qaeda, this Al-Julani, or Ahmed Shara is trying to put a pretty face to the West. He has started a charm offensive.
Pretty but bearded.
Exactly. So great. I mean, we should not lose our sight on the ball, which is right now, I think, Iran and the nuclear.
Indeed.
But on the other hand, we should not let right across from our border a new, let's say, monster coming up as the ISIS, Al-Qaeda, all the radical Sunni, rather than the Iranian Shiite, Sunni radical Islamist and terror activities, which may be backed by Turkey, by Qatar. Qatar also has eyes on Syria. Just yesterday, the new foreign minister and the new defense minister of Al-Julani, of Shara, of Syria, went to Doha. And Qatar, I think it doesn't make any secret of the fact that they would like to build a pipe, a gas pipe from Qatar to Turkey through Syria. By that, actually obviating and minimizing the dependence of Europe on Russian oil. So we have a lot of moving parts here. And maybe, Iran, you can start by deciphering to our good audience what is going on. And of course, nobody can foresee the future. But, what are chances and opportunities or risks and opportunities?
Well, I've been thinking about a line from a song by Johnny Mitchell. You don't know what you've got till it's gone. And to some extent, we lived next door to the Assad clan, father and son, for 54 years.
1970,
54 years. And that was synonymous with Syria. You said Syria, you meant Assad, he's a father or son. And more or less in one for 30 years and the other for 24. And you got used to it to a certain extent. And you knew one thing for certain, that after the 73, when they started with a major surprise, the Syrians, and nevertheless got seriously beaten. And then again, the Air Force was decimated by us in 82. They knew the score, and they never tried again. And now we have the unknown on the other side of the border. And that certainly is the reason why Israel took extensive measures in two key aspects. One is to take forward positions inside the demilitarized zone and somewhat further into Syria to ensure control of our eastern approaches from Syria, secure the Golan Heights from various potential scenarios.
As well as the peak of the Hermon, which
specifically
is
the highest point of the Hermon,
mountain,
which enables us to monitor and dominate what happens below in the Damascus basin. And the other thing was the actual destruction, extensive and unprecedented in history, I think, the destruction of the Syrian military capabilities. Air Force, air defense, and armored and units, etc.
Not, of course, the R&D, the SRS,
and
which
the
is so...
the SRS Center, etc. The full consequence of this is that Syria is, as a state, is not a threat as it used to be. Once upon a time, it was the threat of reference for the IDF, the key threat of reference. Nowadays, there is very little there that can actually threaten Israel in any strategic sense. But we really live with an extreme degree of uncertainty. This could go, it could be benign for the one reason that the level of destruction and desolation in Syria is such that many years would be required to simply put Syria on its feet again, if it's not to become dependent on the illegal export of drugs, which was the Assad regime's source of income. And then, of course, to bring in investors, to bring in money, you need stability and you don't need conflict. So that's a benign scenario. But there could be less benign developments. This could turn out to be an increasingly jihadist, Islamist regime bent on carrying forward an agenda that does not include the existence of Israel. It could descend into chaos with various areas under the control of local warlords and re-emerging type of civil war. We saw this unfolding in Libya after the fall of Gaddafi, and it could happen again. And the third and troubling scenario, which you already alluded to, is that Turkey, under Erdogan, will become the dominant power, will infiltrate every aspect of Syrian life, would position its military inside Syria, air defense, air force, whatever. We've seen this again in Libya when they came to the defense of the government of national accord in Tripoli, when it was about to fall to Haftar and his forces. And they may do this again now in Syria. And for Israel to have Turkey, the second most powerful military in NATO, the largest economy by far in the region, a nation of more than 90 million people, as our strategic neighbor, as long as it is led by a man who harbors us ill, all of these are very worrisome scenarios. I cannot ignore them, and this is why Israel has taken such extensive preventive measures.
Mm-hmm. So basically, Iran...
But on the other side of the ledger, and it's not negligible, two very important positives. One is that Iran has lost not only prestige and billions of dollars invested in sustaining its grip on Syria all these years. It has lost also much of its retaliatory capacity if we act against them, and much of their defensive capacity. And therefore, it is much more open now to the prospect of military action against its nuclear program. And I think it's indicative of this change that even the departing administration in Washington has given the option of military action in Iran much more serious thought than ever. There were no reports of such discussions for all these 4 years of the Biden administration, and now it is being reported that this was taken very seriously. It was the uppermost item, first item in the first handover meeting between Biden and Trump. And certainly the Trump administration, the incoming Trump team, is very much oriented towards action against Iran. So whether Israel or the United States are going to be those who would take action, it is a much more feasible project. Mm-hmm. And the second positive is that Hezbollah is now under a very serious challenge, even internally in Lebanon, and potentially from vengeful Sunni regime in Syria, led by the same people that Hezbollah was busy killing on behalf of the Assad administration, government, for years. And whether they will actually invade Lebanon and take vengeance, I'm not sure. With what we've done to the Syrian military, there's very little there that is capable of confronting a military organization such as Hezbollah. But they can definitely isolate them, close their supply lines, put them on the defensive, which greatly reduces the capacity of Hezbollah to resume its conflict with Israel. And so we can, I think, safely make our arrangements in southern Lebanon as the IDF fulfills its part of the ceasefire deal at our own time, and with a good reason to think that Hezbollah would be deterred from actually provoking us again. So the game has changed in our favor in a very significant way, but there are also risks involved that we must ensure ourselves against from the Israeli point of view.
So I would say that, in hindsight, it's a 2020 view. But Syria, again, like Iraq under Saddam Hussein and many other Middle East countries, that most of them were artificially drawn borders, Sykes-Picot and 1916, talking about more than 100 years ago. And here, Sanremo. And here in Syria, actually, we have to remember that about 85% or 90% are Sunnis. And yet, Assad, which belongs to the Alawites, which are part of...
Allow me to correct you. The Sunnis may be or may have been the majority in Syria, but it's when you add up the various minorities, Alawites, Druze, Christians, Kurds who are Sunni by faith but not Arab, then the Sunni Arabs in Syria are barely a majority, and given that millions have fled, not to mention killed, and hundreds of thousands killed, it's very difficult to ascertain what is the actual proportion now.
Yeah, but certainly the proportion...
But they are a majority, and they are now in power.
And certainly the Alawites were a small minority, about 10 to 12%.
They grew to nearly 20% due to the flight of millions of Sunnis.
Exactly. And the Shiaization of Syria by Hezbollah and by Iran, trying to make it a Shiite. And it's amazing that for 54 years, this model was sustained, but it was all rotten from between,
From within, yes.
So what am I trying to say here? That again, we see this from the outside, formidable countries and dictatorships, but then when there is a little move from the inside, it all just fall down crashing, like the Soviet Union back in 1989.
These things, I've been saying it, I think, in this program from time to time, in the context of Iran and generally, that these things are non-linear. It's not like a boat that sinks slowly because of some crack in its bottom. It capsizes suddenly. It can explode suddenly. A regime can look to us solid and then disintegrate. We saw this in Egypt in 2011. We saw this after 40 more years of rule by Gaddafi in Libya. And we saw this now when the Syrian military simply laid down their weapons, took off their military uniform and vanished into the woodwork.
Yeah. And another example, historically now, 1979, the regime of the Shah fell overnight by Khomeini and the Ayatollahs of the Shiites. Again, I'm not sure that now, in hindsight, France would have allowed Khomeini, who was in exile in near Paris, to go out to Iran. But in any case, I think there are many lessons learned about Iran, because Iran, I think, if I have to think of models of regimes or of authority or for governing, Iran is much more like the Assad Syrian regime or even the old defunct Soviet than anything else. So I guess if I was an Iranian Ayatollah in Iran, I would be shaking in my boots, because they could come and be next in line to just get dissolved. And if they had this Shiite crescent that they built, from Iran, through Iraq, through Syria, through Lebanon, now they're losing it.
Well, of course, two things. First of all, they haven't given up yet. And we see their proxies in Yemen continuing to trouble Israel, mainly not very effectual attacks in terms of damage done or casualties, but very troubling. We are a nation with a sleep deprivation problem, because many Israelis find themselves woken up every other night by alarms. Of course, it's very difficult to retaliate from such a distance against a regime that basically has very little to lose anyway. It's disastrously poor and country, and they're wasting such few resources as they have on their military capacity.
But Iran, they're not a strategic threat to Israel, but they are a strategic threat to Egypt, for instance.
And the Egyptians are finally mumbling about the possibility of action as part of a larger question of who will control the Horn of Africa, the Bab el-Mandeb Straits, Yemen, and so there's a very complicated game going on, because what's happening in Somalia and Somaliland with the Turks and the Iranian meddling, and the Egyptians, of course, are also deeply involved. They have a conflict with Ethiopia, and all of this has something to do also with the balance of power on the other side of the Straits in Yemen. The ultimate solution to the Houthi problem is probably the same as in Syria. The coalition, the government, the legal government of Yemen, winning the war once and for all, backed by the Saudis and the Emiratis, if they can come to an agreement on how to pursue the war, because the differences have been significant. But altogether, the Iranians have not yet given up. But with the new administration coming in Washington, with a very, very firm position on Iran, And you look not only at Trump, but also at the
team.
Marco Rubio, Mike Alt, Hegseth, whatever, whoever ends up making these decisions right next to Trump himself, the Iranians have quite a lot to worry about. And ultimately, I think Rubio has been saying it already, the goal should be the collapse of this regime. Mm-hmm. The problem is it's nonlinear. You don't know how to connect your input to the output, how to actually generate the collapse of a regime in a given time frame. And with the nuclear
there's
clock,
no textbook about
there's no textbook and there's no timeline. Mm-hmm. And since there is a timeline for the nuclear project, for how much enriched uranium is being accumulated within range of enough fissile material for a bomb, we may need to see military action taken before the regime collapses. Mm-hmm. But it should be geared to a broader campaign, a broader strategy aimed at destabilizing the regime. There is already a serious economic dislocation in Iran. There is, of course, the increasing phenomenon of women protesting the repression. And all of this could, at one point, come together the way it did in Syria.
And Iran, because everything you just explained and enumerated, there are some who think that, because of the Iranians' big strategic loss, internally and externally, with all the plights that they have economically and socially and what have you, that the only option that they may see viable for them is to break through to a nuclear capability, which could be very, very dangerous. So one implication is that we have to really keep our eyes all the time and monitoring with, as we say, with 7 eyes and more.
Well, that's exactly it. The 5 eyes.
What's happening? 5 eyes, right?
You know, I'm saying it because that's the name of the collective intelligence capability of all the English-speaking nations.
Yeah. So that's one thing. And secondly, certainly to prepare the capability to strike within almost a moment's notice by Israel, but also the United States.
I think that the decision to expose the fine details of the amazing raid by the IDF, or actually by the Israeli Air Force Special Force Unit, Shaldag, kind of our SAS.
Yeah, Shaldag, I think, means kingfisher.
It's a kingfisher, English, Kingfisher. But they are...
A unit, it's a unit.
They are the special forces of the Israeli Air Force. And a large complement of this unit raided and destroyed an underground research and development facility for missiles deep inside Syria when the Syrian regime was still alive and well in September last year. And the ability to do so is, I think, an indication that long-range airstrikes are not the only weapon in our armory when it comes to the Iranian capabilities. And I think that's as far as anything can be said about this.
And of course, given all this chaotic situation inside Iran, not only in the sense that they have been stripped for most of their air defense, but also locally with what's happening. Yes, there are many violent events that we are not even hearing here. But Iran and the Ayatollahs have their hands full with the Kurds, with the Baluchis, with the Azaris, and they're not safe, for sure. But we have to be very, very smart in how we approach this. I think it is a good thing that even the Biden administration, the outgoing Biden administration, is thinking of a credible military threat that they never had before, which would also give some impetus and some, I would say, would maybe seal in or validate the Trump's incoming administration about the possibility of real attack.
Yeah.
And here, many believe that Trump is the a man who is the deal maker, art of the deal, and all that. That maybe his first option would be to bring the Iranians to the negotiation table.
Yeah, in the familiar, with the familiar line, remember, from the Godfather, he will make them an offer they cannot refuse.
Exactly. And I hope this time, really, if the Iranians will acquiesce and there will be a new deal, I hope that this time the United States
will insist,
better do it alone, not with the P5+1 where you have Russia and China that you cannot really trust. But
with the backing of the Europeans, because that gives
the backing of the Europeans, yes, but certainly we should not allow the Chinese and Iranians and Russians to interfere. And here, we know the JCPOA was very weak and was not long and strong enough. And to make it long and strong enough, first and foremost, you need not only to get out all the enriched uranium, or let them allow them to keep only up to 3.6%. Yes, but also ship out the centrifuges, which was not in the JCPOA. All they had to do is store them under good nylons and just take them out whenever they want, as they did.
As well as terminate the ballistic,
exactly,
which they are required to do under UN resolution.
Exactly, and really, I think we have a good opportunity now. And of course, if the Iranians will be stupid enough not to come to the negotiation table, then the only way is the military option, which is very viable and feasible, and we know now it can be done. A lot was covered, a lot was not covered, but for that we have our next shows. So thank you all for watching TV7 from Jerusalem. The Middle East Review will be here in our next episode soon enough. Thank you.